Hi, and welcome to Hypothetically Intentional, where we ask the question, what if we set intentions with everything we do? I'm your host, Michelle Albers, and today I have a guest that I met way back in 2015 or 16. Her name is Michelle Green. She is the Paradox Witch, and we have not talked in a very long time, and I'm ridiculously excited to catch up with her. So I'm going to just drop in a quick little intention, and then I'm going to spill it over to Michelle, and she, I believe, is willing to set an additional layer to the intention. So, my intention, first and foremost, is to connect at a soul level, deep level conversation, because it feels to me like those kind of conversations that happen on this podcast, the right people find them. And I don't mean right versus wrong. I just mean like if it's something that is said today that will be helpful on your journey, like that's the intention, is that you find it, it finds you. The universe is here to guide us. So, which I think is a little bit in line with where you were going to go today. Phyllis and Michelle, welcome.
Absolutely 100% in alignment with not just everything you're saying, but just in my life right now. And I'll do the introduction in a moment, but just it feels right to share this feeling of like a golden thread of fate taking me to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. And totally feeling like intentionally guided in my life right now. And so it's so in alignment for you to be reaching out and for us to be having this conversation. And I just hope that us being open and radically just accepting of where we're at and where the collective is at, that it can create space for people to receive that kind of acceptance within themselves. I just saw a woodpecker fly off. Anyways, I'm Michelle Green on social media as the Paradox Witch. I identify as an Akashic Oracle and spiritual integration expert. What that means right now is that I offer Akashic sessions and also have a Shadow Priestess course that is an evergreen course that I invite people into. And I do feel, I drew some cards I told Michelle before, and they're all pretty dark. So I'm like, it feels like we get to go there a little bit today. Yeah, that's my intention. Thanks
Oh,
for
that's
having me.
beautiful. Thanks for joining. I'm so happy you said yes. Also, when you said that, that's where we get to go today. I super got the goosebumps. I want to back up to when you were talking about the golden thread, just because this is audio only, and it was such a beautiful way you said it, because you talked about this golden thread and your hands came down like you were gesturing up above your crown, coming through to your heart, and then you like floated them. You used your fingertips to like float that golden thread from your heart out into the world, and I was like, oh, it's like you're just. It was such a beautiful gesture, and I just wanted to describe it because I think that golden thread coming through the crown and coming out the heart is such a beautiful, like that is that's the visual representation of what my intention was the today.
Oh my gosh. And that's so funny because I didn't know I did that. And when I'm opening the Akashic Records, there's two parts to the prayer. The first part of the prayer is allowing the pillar of light to enter through your crown into your body. And the second part of the prayer is connecting your heart to the other person's heart. So I love
All
it.
right. So records are open, maybe. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm going to give my perspective and my perception of back when we first met. I'm
Yeah.
not projecting anything onto you. I would also like to hear your perspective. Is that okay?
Yes, totally.
When I reached out to you and I thought about speaking together on this podcast, I thought about where we both were back in, I'm just going to use 2015. I'm not sure that's 100% accurate, but it's close.
Mhm.
And I think about what we were digging into in our yoga teacher training, how quote unquote messy we both were with it. I feel like we were just uncovering, like wounds were surfacing, and like old, really old but deep truth of patterns that we were telling ourselves were coming up, and we were just really messy within that, and we allowed ourselves to get messy within that. But when I reflect on that, and then I look at both of us today or feel both of us today, I feel like, well, like I said, when we very first hopped on the Zoom call, I feel like we're lifetimes past where we were. Like, I just feel like I've evolved so far away from where I was then. Not to say I'm not still evolving and don't still have stuff bubbling up. But I vividly remember several times of us both just like crying in class separately, but like of just like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to move beyond this stuck that I'm at right now. And I think somehow, some way, like we navigated that together, which is part of the reason I was drawn to reach out to you because I see what you're doing now. And I think, gosh, who would have thought the two of us would be doing what we're doing today?
Mhm.
Like back then, if you would have said that's what we would both be doing, I would have said, you're absolutely, there's no way. I would have been so dismissive about it.
Mm. That's so okay. That's such an interesting perspective. And as you're speaking, I'm trying to tune into the version of me that existed then. And it's so interesting because I feel like the shift for me, and I don't know if you can relate to this at all, but yoga teacher training is inherently a masculine practice. It's specific, it's precise, it's very, very structured. Very certain sequences creating certain energetic qualities, and there's a correct way to feel and do and practice. And in that, there is a lot of power and magic and lineage in the tradition, and quite a bit of limitation as well, as like I've been moving into different phases of my life, and this shift from, and you can maybe relate to this in a yogic context, we have the sankalpa and the vikalpa, and I really relate this sense of the vikalpa, which is that which separates you from your essential nature or something like that. And I relate that very much to shadow work. And how I relate to shadow work now is incredibly different. It's through the lens and context of what if this pattern never goes away? And how can I accept myself and my life with that? And how can I move with that? And how can I see how it serves me? And how can I see how I actually enjoy that? What aspects of me enjoy that? And in that radical acceptance, I have found massive shifts in my life of like, this doesn't even have to change. And in that acceptance, things do change. And there's just so much more space for love. And in that radical acceptance and love, there is more space for authenticity. And it is so much more grounded in the whole truth of like who we are as a human, versus this striving or reaching for perfection. And not saying that that's necessarily the place that yoga takes us. However, it can. And there's like seeds of perfectionism in that path to enlightenment or samadhi, if that's the path that we're following of the eight limbs. And so I'm just reflecting on the part of me, and I have so much compassion for the part of me in that phase of my life who just like wanted to do things right and wanted to be seen and loved. And in that world and in that path, it felt like, well, I can be really good at this. I can do good. I can know things. I can share this knowledge and wisdom. And as I've just like grown on my journey since then, what I share is totally different. Like I don't even teach yoga anymore, although I still utilize so much yogic philosophy and the heart of some yoga asana and meditation practices and concentration. But it just looks so different now. And it's interesting for you to say like, oh, I wouldn't believe if you told me. It's not so much about what my life, maybe it is. I'm trying to like think like, if you would have told me this is what I'd be doing, I'd be like, of course, because
Yeah.
I've been in this realm of, offering psychic readings since like 2010. But if you would have told me how grounded I feel, if you would have told me that I've been able to transform my relationship to scarcity in the way that I have, I would be like, what? Really? Like, and not in the context of like, okay, I'm rich now, everything's taken care of. It's more of a sense of like, I totally got me. Like, no matter what, I've got me. And I think that is the greatest gift of shadow work and the kind of shadow work that I play around with.
Yeah, everything. You like my point exactly. Like when you were talking about it, it's like, because I think over time and as I do the work for myself, I'm not even sure I love that phrase, but as I drop into what feels true for me on any given day, maybe that's a better way to put it. Um, and allow and hold space and guide others and offer tools for others to do the same thing. I don't think it's so much about like dropping off bits of ourselves. I think it's more about like changing the relationship to it and how what energy it brings for you. Like I talk about that with fear all the time. Like it's not that you get rid of fear. Fear doesn't go away. Grief doesn't go away. However, your relationship to it can either like suck your energy dry or can empower you to show up in a way that's from love and compassion. And they both are part of the human experience, but whichever one is the one, like the muscle that you're building, so to speak, for lack of a better, like the spiritual muscle or the light, the vibrational muscle that you're becoming comfortable with in that shift is such a huge piece of it. And something you said recently on social media, which I think is what pinged me. I'm like, I really want to have a conversation with her on the podcast. I've been thinking about it for a while. It's just, things were happening. I was like, I'll reach out when it's exactly aligned.
Mhm.
But you talked about it being your own practice. Like, I don't believe, like, my yoga practice, I say that in quotes. I don't know that I have a yoga practice or a Reiki practice or a tarot practice or a healing practice I don't have one that's in any specific or a Thai massage practice. It's not in any specific lineage anymore.
Yeah.
It's my practice, and I'm grateful for all of those lineages and what they've brought to my life and how I've integrated them into my life. But the structure is a tool to be used to create your own being so that you can practice for yourself within yourself that's what allows you to serve in the world in a way that is compassionate and kind, because if we're trying to tuck ourselves into all of the rules of all of the practices, I'm maybe putting that a little too masculine energy there, but that doesn't work. And I do think there's a piece, like for me, I needed that structure on my journey and I needed to play with all of it. I needed to accept and embrace all of it to decide and discern what didn't work for me.
Mhm.
And then what did work for me. And it's
Mhm.
such a beautiful thing. It's also why I believe in studying with multiple teachers. And then ultimately, though, I have to be like, for me, I know that I want to be really mindful of authority and what that means to me. Authority doesn't mean I have to tuck in and do it right. Authority means I believe they have some sort of gift that might be for me. And then I get to, again, discern and decide how to use it. And I'm careful because I do believe we need outside people for checks and balances. But I also believe we need to be careful about how we engage with said outside people for checks and balances.
This is such an interesting and complex conversation that I've been having with multiple people as I really anchor into my mission here on earth, which is to inspire and awaken truth in other people. And I have been so anchored into this understanding that I have nothing to teach people and I don't want to teach people. I want to be this reflection for people to activate something within themselves that feels correct. And this whole idea of lineage, and for some people that is their path to like be a disciple of a lineage, and I so honor that. And I think that we have to just like stop skirting around all of these big issues of we have the rise of awareness, of appropriation, of power dynamics, of a colonist mindset that does take and pick from everything and want to like make it your own, but that is in the context of power dynamics and the suppression of the cultures that we've taken these beautiful things from, and the lineages that we've participated in. And I think that a lot of these lineages have thrived and they are not perfect. And I think that's something we have to talk about, how each lineage, none of them are in perfection and they exist in duality. And how we relate to them is shifting as we, to me, I feel like we are shifting into a new paradigm on Earth. This is a revolutionary time. I 100% believe in it. And the time of secrecy within lineages is over. And I think that it is challenging to navigate those difficulties of conflict as we move into this new paradigm of we get to create our own way of working with these practices that we know that there is an essential truth in all of them, that we, each path and each lineage and each modality is a unique access point to source energy and source, both information and consciousness and energy. And they're all important and they're all necessary. And in that, we all need each other, because one access point is not enough. We're in this together in the context of it takes all types. It takes a circle of people to connect to a deeper sense of truth. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, I think it's just such a fascinating journey as far as because I definitely have like that duality comes in for me sometimes where I'm like, I believe in honoring and respecting, you know, things, people,
Yeah.
ideas, and I buck back if there's a rigidity in it that feels really closed-minded and like loving and not compassionate.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be duality in the world. I think it's part of the human experience. I also think it can get messy for people. And when we're brave enough to show up and do the work to show up within ourselves in a new and different way that feels more like love and compassion and kindness and healing, I think it can get really messy really quick within that duality. And I don't know. I just think I'm so grateful for the people along my way and that continue to be in my life to hold that space to be my checks and balances when I don't have it within myself to show up in that way. And I'm also grateful that they taught me, or somehow I extrapolated out. I really believe they taught me this because I don't feel like I resonated with any teachers that are still in my life
Yeah.
that were closed-minded or dictative, you know. But they taught me that I get to discern, and
Yeah.
I get to also understand that sometimes my discernment isn't spot on. And
Mhm.
that sometimes what I think is my connection to spirit is actually my fear or my resistance to change or to the pain that's coming in that transition, if that makes sense.
Mm. Mm. Yes.
Which I feel like might circle us into, when we first started, we kind of talked about shadow work. And I love your perspective of, it's not that we get rid of the things we hate about ourselves, so to speak. I mean, I'm simplifying what you said,
Yeah.
but I think it's really important to understand that we get to love all bits of ourselves.
Yeah.
And some bits of ourselves used to, perhaps still do, bring energies like guilt and shame
Mm.
or anger or frustration or, something. However, part of that is maybe because we just haven't spent time looking or spent time in it or had a moment to consider that there might be some compassion available and a new perspective that we just have never considered.
Yes.
Talk to me about your shadow work a little bit, if you don't mind sharing. I would love to hear more
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, I think that this is just so important for these times when there is such, and I could just like cry, thinking about and feeling into the violence in this world. And I have been really sitting with, like, how do we create a new world, but within the context of duality? That is never, like, we're never going to send that. And if we do, then we're not really going to be in our human experience and in this human body anymore. But, like, what actually could the new paradigm look like of this integration? And that to me is an integration of our duality. And that has to start with not only within ourselves, the things about, ourselves we don't like and the patterns that we keep repeating and all of that, but also the violence of the world and what is too hard to look at without, and what part of us like has that there too. And that is the only healing that is available to the collective is I have that too. I have that too. There's a part of me that has that too. And a lot, whether it is reflected outward or reflected inward, there is something that happens when we encounter that difficulty and we go, oh, no, gotta heal that. Oh, I can't look at that. And we like turn away from it. And that is the resistance that perpetuates the suffering. That is the shame that keeps us repeating these cycles. And there's a really beautiful teacher that I love following his teachings, and I'm probably going to butcher his last name, David Bederick. And he is a shame teacher, essentially. That's such an oversimplification, but he talks about how our inner violence needs to be witnessed. Like, we need somebody to be like, see, this is this pain that's within me. And then instead of let's heal it, let's fix it, so like, tell me about it. Tell me about that pain. What is it? What does it say? And just like, oh, wow, that's a really violent inner thought. Like, I see that, of course. And just to hold compassion and space for that inner violence and to be witnessed. And even yesterday, I was sitting in a ceremony with a friend, and she told me a story that was basically sitting with a friend who was in self-harm. And she said, here, show me. And that person never did it again. And it just was like, that is such a beautiful story. And what if every person in pain had somebody to be like, show me your pain? And I'm crying because it's like, that is the healing that the world needs right now, not like more people being like, this is how you heal, this is the answer. Like, giving us answers. We need more people being like, show me your pain and I can see it and I can hold it. I want to witness you in that. And we do that, with others, of course, but like within ourselves. And even for me, it looked like I was on a hike with a friend and I was like tapping every mushroom I saw and scratching the moss. And then I just heard this inner violent thought that was like, you're so annoying. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. You're so annoying. What does that feel like? Like, where whose voice is that? And I just was able to reflect and be like, oh, that was from this friendship where I had to be on, like, walk on eggshells and she would always make these comments. And I'm just like, oh, that's not me. And I just hold space for that inner violent thought of just like, you're so annoying. And just like love it and get to know it instead of be like, ooh, or internalize it and start changing my behavior. And instead, I brought it to the person that I was on this hike with. And I was like, this is a really interesting thought that appeared in my head. And I just like shared this undoing, and it's my perspective that if it's coming, it's going. If it's arising to your awareness, it's meant to pass through you. And there's like so much pain and suffering that is additional that comes when we don't let it flow through us.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think it's such a, even as you're speaking about it, it's like, yeah, I mean, healing, there are so many words that have so many meanings. And if we use them with the assumption that we're all using the same definition, it gets slippery,
Yeah.
because I truly feel like, yes, the world could stand some healing and some
Mm-hmm.
kindness and some compassion.
Yeah.
And I also truly feel that if every person, maybe not every person, just the more people that choose to do what you were just talking about, to as it bubbles up, have a conversation with it, look at it, give it some compassion and some attention and some love and just hear it, whatever it is. That clearing, that healing, that feels like healing to me. That is a shift in perspective. It is something that felt heavy and now feels light. That's how it feels when it happens within me. Your words felt that way, right? To me. And
Mm-hmm.
if that happens more and more, the ripple effect of that energy and that release and that ability to hold space within that kind of a neutrality almost. I mean, it's compassion, but it's also, it's not fired, it's not charged, it just is. And there's
Yeah.
an acceptance within that, and there's a change within the relationship in that. And I feel like that is how like the collective comes together and raises the consciousness or raises the vibration or raises just the idea of compassion.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like one of my favorite books, I don't know if you've read it. Um, it's Carolyn Elliott, I think is the name on the book, but she's since changed her name to Carolyn Lovewell. And it's Existential Kink. And it's one of my favorite practices and books in regards to shadow work. And it is essentially a total acceptance of our messed up nature, because the truth is humans are so messed up. Like it's crazy how messed up we are in our psyches, and like, and that's a part of the duality of like, to have the good and the light, you have to have the dark and the bad. And whether that's a good example or not, but that there's this practice in existential kink of a somatic approach to that of, okay, I'm feeling triggered again, or this pattern is here again. And then you tune into your body and you experience it honestly as turn on. Like, okay, what's going on? Ooh, this pattern of whatever it is for you of engaging in relationships in a certain way, or scarcity showing up again, and it's triggering this thing of going into your body and being like, okay, it's this like bubbling up of my chest, and it's like, or this like constriction in my throat, whatever this is. And then how do you enjoy that sensation instead of turning away or trying to go into this mental approach? You go into the sensation that's activated in the trigger and be like, I can be actively turned on by this sensation. And something happens in that exploration on a somatic approach where you're like whole, and it's not a mental, I enjoy my suffering, because in a way, one part of us does, but it is a somatic approach. It is totally different to be like, holy shit, I do love this suffering. It's my familiar friend of suffering. It's my favorite, unique, like flavor of suffering. And of course, I keep repeating it over and over because it activates me. Whatever it is you're getting out of it. A lot of times, like those of us who can relate to victim mindset and like this addiction to being the victim, there is so much we get out of that. And I want to unshame that we get connection, we get people supporting us then when we're the victim, we get resources when we're the victim, we get so much, or we get justified in our loneliness, or whatever it is, that there's aspect, and we have so many parts to ourselves beyond just the conscious mind, because it seems so messed up to say like, I love this. But when you go into the body and discern the sensation, it's like, no, I actually do love this. And then that acceptance can change so, so much in your life.
I love the layers of how we can shift energy, shift our perspective. And what I heard there is evolving into self-trust because like that's kind of where we started, was that whole idea. Like you were like, I got this. I know I got this. And
Mhm.
you know, like we were talking, I think you were talking about scarcity at that point. And it's just like, I got this. I got this no matter what. And that for me was one of the biggest sort of light switches, for lack of a better phrase or
Yeah.
metaphor for it, is that, oh my gosh, I know that like ultimately I really truly do trust myself. I might not always make the best decisions. I might not always, you know, but I do know that even if I make a horrible decision, I will find my way out of that. And also, is there a horrible decision? Sure. Yes, I believe there are horrible decisions. And also, I believe I can change my perspective within any of those and get out of my guilt, shame, regret, and move into, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I show up differently next time? Where do I go from here?
Yeah.
And who do I need to support me on that journey?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because it's a shift from like, what does it all mean? Where am I going? To just like, this is information and where
Yeah.
is it leading me? This is
Yeah.
information and where is it leading me over and over and over. And it's such a neutral thing, but we get to experience it however we experience it and in our bodies. And I think that's just there's that healthy balance between neutrality and like radical feeling and opening fully to it.
Yeah. I just, when you said the balance, I was like, oh, it's just, it's, if you think about it, every person has their own alchemy, and every person will have their own alchemy within whatever journey they're taking right now, and finding that, being willing to explore it as well, and to just like dance a little
Yeah.
within it is such a beautiful, albeit uncomfortable thing if you've never done it before. And there's something about understanding that there's not necessarily a right way, or maybe there's not only one way to find the alchemy. There's a lot of different ways to get there.
Mhm.
Even for one person. Like I do believe we kind of all have our own vibration and own ways we tick, and there's certain, you know, doors that are meant for us and certain that aren't. But I think there's more than one door. I just think there's so many different ways we can go about it. And I think allowing yourself that grace and compassion to get uncomfortable, and to allow yourself to
Mhm.
be comfortable too. Like, can I just take a hot second and be comfortable in the victimhood, you know, because it's
Mhm.
giving me something in that moment that I don't have the capacity for anything else? Sure, I can. And then also I can choose to see it from a different perspective and understand that I actually have more light, power, strength, neutrality if I show up from this other perspective. And then I want to play a little bit there and see what that feels like. And it's a constant flow almost. I'll be some more prickly than others.
Yeah.
um, and I think we get to be in it.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my course on shadow work, shadow priestess, I have these like three phases of shadow work, I call it. And it's regulation, activation, and play. And so it's like there are times where it is like, and regulation is such a broad context because I think we think of nervous system regulation as controlling the nervous system,
Mm.
when in reality, a lot of regulation is honoring what the nervous system is showing you, whether, you know, like for example, like dissociation can look like binging out on Netflix because you've been in a functional freeze state for so long that you're like, I have zero capacity for like writing an email, zero capacity for anything beyond like showing up to work and laying in bed and watching Netflix. And like there's so much de-shaming because we don't really see that as a healthy behavior, when in reality it's just information of like, this is an example of functional freeze, and dissociation is a very healthy part of a nervous system. It is a very healthy response to that state. And so that's, you know, an exploration. And I have a guest speaker in that offering a workshop on the nervous system and that, and then activation of like what to do when you're like triggered, like what energy do you flow with, what kind of practices work in that activated state. And then play is more of like the existential kink, allowing yourself to go all into the drama, like somatically throwing a tantrum of like when you're in the victimhood and you're like, I don't want to fucking alchemize this. I want to like be like, the world is against me. And like, what happens when you go all out and be the actor of that emotion of like, literally everybody hates me. The world is against me. Like, I'm all alone. And like, what happens when you dramatize that? Like, that also changes the energy. And so, anyways, there's those three kind of phases of shadow work inside of my course that I play with because yeah, you're not always in the space to be like, no, this is where I'm at in this functional free state. This is all the energy I have, and this is what I'm going to explore as shadow work. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. We could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. I really think we could. I feel like I feel like if you have time, I love the idea of wrapping up this week's podcast here and then doing a part 2 for next week. How do you feel about that? Do you have time for it?
I love it.
Okay. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to say bye, be you every day, and tune in next week because Michelle and I are going to continue where we started.
Woo, bye. Thank you.